away your own shadow. The more effort you exert, the more solid and real the shadow appears to become. What you resist persists not because resistance is futile, but because resistance itself is a form of attention, and attention is the very food upon which thoughts survive and multiply. Instead of resistance, I offer you a far more elegant and effective approach. I offer you the practice of assumption. When a negative thought presents itself to you, do not fight it. Do not judge it. Do not even analyze it. Simply assume the opposite. If the thought says you are weak, assume you are strong. If it says you are poor, assume you are abundant. If it says you are loved, assume you are cherished beyond measure. This is not positive thinking in the way most people understand it. This is not about repeating affirmations or trying to convince yourself of something you do not believe. This is about understanding the fundamental creative power of assumption and wielding it consciously and deliberately. Every state of consciousness is achieved through assumption and the reason negative thoughts seem so compelling, so urgent, so real, is that they carry with them the feeling of truth. They feel real because you have assumed them to be real, often unconsciously and repeatedly. But feelings follow assumption, not the other way around. When you assume a new state, when you dare to believe something different about yourself or your circumstances, the feelings that correspond to that assumption will inevitably follow. Let me illustrate this with a simple example. Suppose you are walking through life carrying the assumption that you are unsuccessful, that opportunities pass you by, that you are somehow not worthy of the good things life has to offer. This assumption, held consistently, will generate thoughts that confirm and reinforce it. You will notice every closed door, every rejection, every seeming failure. Your mind will present you with a constant stream of evidence that supports your assumption of unworthiness. But what happens when you dare to assume the opposite? What happens when you begin to assume that you are successful, that opportunities seek you out, that you are inherently worthy of all good things? Initially, your old pattern of thinking may continue for a while, like a record that keeps playing even after you have lifted the needle. But as you persist in your new assumption, as you refuse to give life to the old thoughts by withdrawing your attention from them, something miraculous begins to happen. The thoughts that arise begin to change. Instead of noticing failures, you begin to notice possibilities. Instead of seeing closed doors, you begin to see opening pathways. Instead of evidence of unworthiness, you begin to see confirmation of your inherent value and capability. The same world that once seemed to conspire against you now appears to be conspiring for you, not because the world has changed, but because you have changed the assumption through which you perceive and interpret your experience. This brings us to a crucial understanding about the nature of negative thoughts. They are not random visitors that arrive from some external source. They are the natural offspring of your assumptions about yourself and your world. Change your assumptions, and you change the very source from which your thoughts spring. This is why fighting individual thoughts is ultimately futile. It is like trying to change a river by rearranging the water downstream while leaving the source untouched. The source of your thoughts is your conception of yourself. Your self-concept is the sum total of all your beliefs about who you are, what capable of what you deserve, and what is possible for you. Every thought that enters your mind is colored by this conception. If your self-concept is one of limitation, lack, and unworthiness, then even positive circumstances will be interpreted through this lens, and your thoughts will find ways to diminish or dismiss your good fortune. But when your self-concept is one of abundance, capability, and inherent worth, then even challenging circumstances are interpreted differently. Instead of seeing problems, you see opportunities for growth. Instead of seeing obstacles, you see stepping stones. Instead of seeing evidence of your limitations, you see temporary appearances that will soon yield to your greater understanding of your true nature. This is why I emphasize so strongly the importance of revision. When your mind presents you with negative thoughts about past events, about things that went wrong, about failures and disappointments, you have the power to revise these memories. Not to deny that they occurred, but to change their meaning, to reinterpret them from the standpoint of your true identity as a being of infinite creative power. When you revise a memory, you are not changing the past in the literal sense. You are changing the psychological impact of that memory, the assumptions you derive from it, the conclusions you drew about yourself and your capabilities. You are reclaiming your power from past events and redirecting it toward the creation of your future. For instance, if your mind keeps presenting you with thoughts about a business failure from years ago, thoughts that whisper that you are not cut out for success, that you should not take risks, that you are destined to fail, you can revise that memory. You can see that apparent failure as a necessary step in your education, as a valuable lesson that prepared you for greater success, as evidence of your courage and willingness to dare greatly. As you revise the memory with this new interpretation, the thoughts that spring from it begin to change. Instead of thoughts of fear and limitation, you begin to have thoughts of wisdom and capability. Instead of being haunted by the past, you become empowered by it. The same event that once generated negative thoughts now becomes a source of strength and confidence. This practice of revision is one of the most powerful tools you possess in dealing with negative thoughts, because it addresses them at their root. Most negative thinking patterns can be traced back to specific events or experiences that created limiting beliefs about yourself. By revising these foundational memories, you undermine the entire structure of negative thinking that was built upon them. But revision is not the only tool at your disposal. There is also the practice of living from the end, of assuming that you already what you wish to become, that you already have what you wish to possess, that you already experience what you wish to experience. When you live from the end, negative thoughts become not just unwelcome, but literally irrelevant to your current state of being. If you are assuming that you are already financially abundant, for example, thoughts of poverty and lack have no place in your consciousness. They become foreign to your assumed state, like trying to play a record of classical music on a jazz radio station. The frequency does not match, and so the thoughts cannot take hold and multiply. This is why I say that the best defense against negative thoughts is a good offense. Instead of waiting for negative thoughts to arise and then trying to deal with them, you proactively fill your consciousness with the thoughts and feelings that correspond to your desired state. You become so identified with who you choose to be that there is no room, no welcome, no resonance for thoughts that contradict this identity. But I must warn you about a common pitfall in this practice. Many people try to live from the end while secretly doubting their ability to do so. They assume abundance while feeling poor, assume health while feeling sick, assume love while feeling lonely. This creates an internal conflict that actually generates more negative thoughts, not fewer. The key is to start with assumptions that feel natural and believable to you, even if they are not yet your ultimate goal. If financial abundance feels too far-fetched, assume financial security. If perfect health seems impossible, assume improving health. If deep love feels unreachable, assume increasing self-acceptance. Start where you can believe and let your belief grow naturally as you experience the fruits of your assumption. Remember, assumption is not about convincing yourself of something that contradicts your senses. It is about choosing to identify with a state of consciousness that feels natural and possible to you. As you dwell in this state, as you think from it rather than about it, it gradually becomes your dominant mood, your habitual way of being. And from this new vantage point, what once seemed impossible begins to appear not only possible but inevitable. This brings us to the importance of persistence in dealing with negative thoughts. The mind, like any mechanism, operates according to habit. If you have been thinking negatively for years, your mind has developed strong neural pathways that automatically generate negative thoughts in response to certain triggers. These pathways do not disappear overnight simply because you have decided to think differently. But here's the beautiful truth. Every time you choose to withdraw your attention from a negative thought and redirect it toward your desired state, you weaken the old pathway and strengthen a new one. Every time you refuse to entertain doubt and instead assume faith, every time you decline to indulge in worry and instead embrace confidence, every time you turn away from fear and toward love, you are literally rewiring your brain, creating new patterns of thought. that serve your highest good. This process requires patience and consistency. You would not expect to develop physical strength by going to the gymnasium once, and similarly, you cannot expect to transform lifelong thinking patterns with a single decision. But just as physical exercise becomes easier and more enjoyable with practice, mental discipline becomes more natural and automatic as you develop it. The secret is to be gentle with yourself during this process. When negative thoughts arise, do not berate yourself for having them. Do not add the negative thought about having negative thoughts to your already burdened mind. Simply notice them with the detached awareness of a scientist observing a phenomenon, and then gently redirect your attention to where you choose to focus it. Think of yourself as a gardener tending to the garden of your mind. When you see weeds, you do not become angry with the garden. You simply remove the weeds and plant something more beautiful in their place. You understand that gardening is an ongoing process, that weeds will continue to appear, but that with consistent care and attention, the garden will flourish and the weeds will become less frequent and less troublesome. Your mind is the same. Negative thoughts are like weeds that will occasionally sprout, especially in the beginning of your practice. But as you consistently remove them and plant positive assumptions in their place, your mental garden becomes increasingly beautiful, increasingly supportive of your growth and happiness. Now, let me address a question that arises in many minds. What about justified negative thoughts? What about thoughts that seem to be based on real problems, genuine challenges, legitimate concerns? Surely you might think it would be foolish to ignore real problems by simply assuming they do not exist. This is where a deeper understanding of the nature of reality becomes essential. What you call problems are not objective facts existing independently of your consciousness. They are interpretations, meanings you assign to circumstances based on your assumptions about what is possible, what is good, what is threatening, and what is beneficial. The same circumstance can be interpreted as a problem by one person and as an opportunity by another, as a setback by one and as a setup for something better by another, as evidence of limitation by one and as a catalyst for growth by another. The circumstance itself is neutral. The meaning, the emotional charge, the significance you assign to it comes entirely from your state of consciousness, from your assumptions about yourself and your world. When you change your assumptions, you literally change your world. Because your world is not a collection of objective facts, but a subjective experience created by your consciousness. This is not philosophical speculation, but practical truth that you can verify through your own experience. Begin to assume that challenges serve your highest good, that every apparent setback contains the seeds of an even greater comeback, that the universe is constantly conspiring to help you become who you are meant to be, and watch how your experience of these same circumstances begins to transform. This does not mean you become passive or irresponsible. It means you approach circumstances from a position of power rather than victimhood, from confidence rather than fear, from curiosity rather than dread. You take inspired action based on your vision of what is possible rather than reactive action based on your fear of what might go wrong. When negative thoughts arise about your circumstances, therefore, you treat them the same way you treat any other negative thoughts. You do not fight them or analyze them or try to determine whether they are justified. You simply withdraw your attention from them and redirect it toward the assumption that serves your highest good. You assume that this circumstance, whatever it may be, is working for you, not against you. And you maintain this assumption until it hardens into fact. This brings us to the role of feeling in dealing with negative thoughts. Thoughts without feeling are relatively powerless. They are like seeds without water, unable to take root and grow into manifest experience. But thoughts charged with feeling, thoughts that evoke strong emotional responses, these have tremendous creative power. They impress themselves upon your consciousness and ultimately upon your world. Most negative thoughts derive their power from the fear, anger, sadness, or other negative emotions they evoke. When you feel the emotional charge of a negative thought, you are literally breathing life into it, giving it the energy it needs to reproduce itself and manifesting your experience. This is why simply trying to think positive thoughts while feeling negative emotions is often ineffective. The emotion is more powerful than the thought, and it will ultimately create experiences that match its vibration. The solution is not to suppress negative emotions, which is neither healthy nor effective, but to change the assumptions that generate them. When you assume a state of consciousness that is aligned with your desires, the emotions that naturally arise from this assumption will be positive, supportive, and creative. You will not have to force yourself to feel good. You will feel good naturally as a result of your assumption. For example, if you are worried about your financial situation, trying to force yourself to feel abundant while maintaining the assumption that you are poor will create internal conflict and stress. Instead, begin to assume that your financial situation is improving, that opportunities for increase are constantly presenting themselves, that you have skills and abilities that are valuable and in demand. As you dwell in this assumption, you will naturally begin to feel more hopeful, more confident, and more abundant. These feelings will then support and strengthen your assumption, creating a positive feedback loop that spirals upward toward manifestation. This is the secret of working with both thought and feeling in harmony rather than in opposition. You do not try to control your feelings directly, which is difficult and often counterproductive. Instead, you control your assumptions and you allow your feelings to flow naturally from these assumptions. You think from your desired state rather than about it. And the feelings that correspond to this state arise spontaneously and authentically. But what about those moments when negative thoughts seem overwhelming? When they come in torrents rather than occasional drops? When your entire mental atmosphere seems clouded by negativity? These are the times when the practice of assumption becomes most crucial and most challenging. It is easy to maintain positive assumptions when life is going well, when circumstances are favorable, when you feel strong and confident. The real test comes when everything seems to be going wrong, when you feel weak and discouraged, when negative thoughts feel not just probable but inevitable. In these moments, remember that the darkest hour is just before the dawn. The intensity of the negative thoughts often indicates that you are on the verge of a breakthrough, that your old patterns of thinking are making their last desperate attempt to maintain their hold on your consciousness. This is when you must be most vigilant, most committed to your practice, most determined to maintain your assumption regardless of appearances. Do not let the intensity of the negative thoughts convince you that they are more real or more powerful than your positive assumptions. Intensity is not the same as truth. A nightmare can feel extremely intense and real while you are experiencing it. But when you awaken, you realize it was only a dream, only a temporary experience in consciousness with no lasting reality. Negative thoughts, no matter how intense, are also temporary experiences in consciousness. They have no power except the power you give them through your attention and belief. When you refuse to be intimidated by their intensity, when you persist in your positive assumptions, despite their clamor, you demonstrate to your subconscious mind that you are the master of your consciousness, not its slave. In these challenging times, it can be helpful to have specific techniques at your disposal. One powerful method is to immediately redirect your attention to a vivid imaginal scene that represents your desired state. When negative thoughts about your health arise, immediately imagine yourself vibrant and energetic. When thoughts of financial lack present themselves, immediately see yourself enjoying abundance and security. When thoughts of loneliness or rejection appear, immediately experience yourself surrounded by love and appreciation. The key is to make this imaginal experience as vivid and as real as possible. Engage all your senses. See the colors, hear the sounds, feel the textures, smell the fragrances, taste the sweetness of your fulfilled desire. The more real you can make this imaginal experience, the more effectively it will counteract the negative thoughts and redirect your consciousness toward your desired outcome. Another powerful technique is the practice of mental arguing. When a negative thought presents itself, engage it in debate from the standpoint of your desired state. If the thought says you will never be successful, argue back that success is your natural state, that you are already successful in consciousness, that manifestation is simply a matter of time. If the thought claims you are unworthy of love, argue that you are love itself, that love is the very essence of your being, that you attract love naturally and effortlessly. This is not self-delusion, but self-determination. You are not trying to convince yourself of something false, but reminding yourself of something true. You are a being of infinite creative power, made in the image and likeness of the creative force of the universe. Love, abundance, health, success, and joy are not foreign to your nature. They are expressions of your true self. When you argue for these truths against the lies of limitation, you are not being unrealistic, but supremely realistic about your true identity and capabilities. As you develop these practices, you will begin to notice that negative thoughts lose their emotional charge. What once would have sent you into spirals of worry or despair now registers as merely an old pattern trying to reassert itself. You observe these thoughts with detached compassion, like a parent watching a child throw a tantrum, knowing that this too shall pass, and that underneath the temporary disturbance lies an essential goodness waiting to emerge. This detached observation is itself a powerful tool in dealing with negative thoughts. When you can observe them without being overwhelmed by them, without identifying with them, without believing that they represent the truth about you or your circumstances, they lose their power to disturb your peace and derail your progress. You begin to see negative thoughts as temporary weather patterns in the sky of your consciousness. Sometimes there are storms, sometimes there are clouds, but the sky itself remains eternally clear and infinite. Your true self, your I AM consciousness, is like that sky, forever unchanged by the temporary weather patterns that pass through it. This understanding brings tremendous freedom and peace. You no longer need to have perfect control over every thought that enters your mind. You no longer need to achieve some impossible state of perpetual positivity. You simply need to remember who you are and choose to identify with your true nature rather than the temporary movements of thought and emotion that pass through your awareness. The practice becomes less about eliminating negative thoughts entirely, which is neither necessary nor possible for most people, and more about changing your relationship with them. Instead of being their victim, you become their observer. Instead of being controlled by them, you learn to direct them. Instead of being defined by them, you recognize them as temporary visitors in the vast space of your consciousness. As this understanding deepens, you will find that negative thoughts begin to appear less frequently and with less intensity. Not because you are fighting them, but because you are no longer feeding them with your attention and belief. Like plants that wither when deprived of water and sunlight, negative thought patterns gradually weaken and fade when you consistently withdraw your life force from them and redirect it toward thoughts and assumptions that serve your highest good. But the ultimate goal is not merely the absence of negative thoughts, but the presence of creative, constructive, joyful thoughts that reflect your true nature and support your highest aspirations. As you become more skilled at assuming positive states of consciousness, as you learn to live from the end of your desires, as you develop the habit of seeing yourself and your world through the lens of possibility rather than limitation, your natural thought patterns begin to align with these assumptions. You find yourself spontaneously thinking thoughts that support your goals, that encourage your growth, that celebrate your possibilities. You no longer have to work to maintain a positive attitude. Positivity becomes your natural state because it flows from your positive assumptions about yourself and your world. This is the great secret that most people never discover. You do not need to fight negative thoughts, because when you truly understand your creative power and learn to wield it consciously, negative thoughts become irrelevant to your experience. They may occasionally arise like echoes from an old way of being, but they have no power to disturb your peace or alter your course, because you are grounded in a deeper understanding of who you are and what you are capable of creating. The transformation from being a victim of your thoughts to being the master of your consciousness is not always easy, but it is always possible. It requires commitment, persistence, and faith in your own creative power. It requires the willingness to take responsibility for your mental state rather than blaming circumstances, other people, or past experiences for your negative thinking. But as you undertake this journey, as you begin to experience the fruits of your new understanding, you will discover that it is the most worthwhile endeavor you could possibly pursue. For in learning to master your thoughts, you learn to master your destiny. In learning to assume positive states of consciousness, you learn to create positive experiences. In learning to see yourself as the creator of your reality, rather than its victim, you step into the fullness of your power and begin to live the life you were truly meant to live. My friends, you have within you right now everything you need to transform your relationship with negative thoughts. You have the power of assumption, the ability to choose what you will believe about yourself and your circumstances. You have the capacity for imagination, the faculty through which all creative power flows. You have the gift of consciousness itself, the very medium in which all possibilities exist and from which all realities emerge. The only question is, what will you choose to assume? What will you choose to believe? What will you choose to imagine? What will you choose to experience? The power is yours. It has always been yours, and it will always be yours. Negative thoughts have no power except the power you give them. And positive thoughts have infinite power when you align with them fully and completely. Tonight, as you leave this place and return to your daily life, remember that you are not going back to the same old reality. You are returning with new understanding, new tools, new power. You are returning as someone who knows the secret of dealing with negative thoughts, not through struggle and resistance, but through assumption and redirection, through remembering who you truly are and choosing to live from that truth. The negative thoughts may still arise, especially in the beginning, but you now know that they are not your master. You are their master. You now know that they are not the truth about you, but temporary appearances in consciousness that have no permanent reality. You now know that every time you choose to assume something better, every time you redirect your attention from what you do not want to what you do want, every time you remember your power and use it consciously, you are not just changing your thoughts, but transforming your entire world. This is the promise I make to you tonight. If you will apply these principles consistently, if you will practice the art of assumption with dedication and faith, if you will persist in seeing yourself as the creator of your experience, rather than its victim, you will not only overcome negative thinking, but discover a joy, a peace, and a sense of empowerment that you never knew was possible. You will become a living demonstration of the truth that consciousness is the only reality, and that by changing your consciousness, you can change your world. The time for being a victim of your thoughts is over. The time for being a master of your consciousness has begun. Go forth and create the life you desire, one assumption at a time, one thought at a time, one moment at a time. The power is yours, and the kingdom of heaven is within you.